Let me pull it up. Alrighty. So thank you everybody for joining us for the Symbiota Support Group meeting today. I'm Lindsay, I'm the community manager, and I'll just be getting us started with a few slides, and then Laura will be picking it up and talking about label making in your Symbiota portal. So just a few announcements to get us started. If you're not aware, the annual meeting of Spinach is happening this week, virtually and in person, so the whole week. It's not too late to register, and one of the reasons that we want to bring it up is that the Symbiota Support Hub is at Spinach this week, both virtually and in person. We have 3 presentations, a poster, and there will be somebody at the Help Desk Support Center, I think both virtually and in person. Our schedule of events for the conference this week is on our website. We'll post the link to this in the chat briefly. But something to consider, if you haven't registered for Spinach, you can still register, so it's not too late. And then importantly, next month, so this meeting is the first Monday of the month, and because that falls on a holiday, next month we won't be having the support group meeting. So enjoy your July 4th, and then we will reconvene in August to talk about our next support group topic. However, that same week on July 6th, so that's the Wednesday, there will be a data portal lunch break with the Consortium of California Herbaria covering loan management in the CCH2 portal, which everybody here is invited to attend if you choose. That'll be at noon Pacific or 3 Eastern. If you want to join, the link for that Zoom room is on this slide, which we will also share in the chat. I can share that momentarily once I'm done talking, but everybody is invited to join if they'd like. So that will be Wednesday, July 6th. And then just a few quick reminders before we get started. If you weren't at the support group meeting last month, please note that our help desk email has changed. It's now help@symbiota.org. Previously, it was like symbiota@asu.edu. Now it's help@symbiota.org. And the second way you can contact us, and it's sort of the same way, just a different look and feel, is you can go to our web form at help.symbiota.org. So whether you email us or enter something in that form, we're monitoring those tickets and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you're not already aware, there's lots of documentation in our growing body of resources for the community. So Symbiota Docs is a place where you can find written resources. And then of course we have our recordings posted on YouTube. So both of those links are here. We'll share those in the chat as well. And then just for the support group specifically, the recordings for these meetings are posted on our website, as are the meeting topics for upcoming support group meetings. So if you're not sure if you want to attend, or if you're trying to plan out your schedule, you can always kind of check back there and find out what we're going to be talking about this month. And then something I want to point out is that we now also have what we call the pre-meeting survey. So say you're a little bit shy and you don't want to raise your hand to ask questions during the support group meetings, you can always ask questions to be answered live ahead of time by filling out that form. That's also on the same web page that our support group topics are posted on. And then it's another way, if you can't attend live, but you want a question to be answered and you're going to watch the recording later, you can also put your questions in there, or any announcements that you'd like us to share during the course of the meeting. So just wanted to point that out. And now that we've gotten through those quick housekeeping activities, today Laura will be talking about creating labels in a Symbiota portal. Laura, are you able to share?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I will. I hope everyone can see my screen.
Looks good.
So yes, I'm Laura, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a biodiversity informatician at ASU. I'm working with the Symbiota Support Hub to develop new tools for Symbiota, to test them, and to write some documentation or help guides as well. So, and I was majorly involved in the label module. So I think I can answer most questions if you have any by the end of the session. So what we'll be touching on today would be label printing in Symbiota. Creating and designing labels, printing labels, and also answering questions. So first of all, we have to discuss what is needed to get a label printed. And why would you print a label, actually? So if you're using Symbiota as a collection management software, and you're doing some curation in your specimens that you entered in Symbiota, and you want to print labels for them, we have a tool for that. Also, if you are someone who is visiting collections and you want to add determination labels to samples, we also have a tool for that. You can print, they're called Annotation Labels. And if you're doing, let's say you're doing a field trip and you're entering a bunch of collected samples in your Symbiota database, and you want to print all of your labels at once to like batch organize or batch curate your samples, your specimens, you can do that with Symbiota as well. So those would be the most common use cases for Symbiota, for label printing in Symbiota. To get a label printed using any Symbiota portal, you need a few things. First of all, you need permission to a collection that you would like to print labels with. If you are a super admin on a portal, you can do most things without needing specific permissions. But if you're an editor, you need to have a collection editor permission, if that makes sense. You also need a label format of choice, and we'll be showing you how to use the default label formats or how to create your own. And you need a little list of specimens that you would like to get printed. And there's no minimum or maximum amount of specimens that you can get labels printed for at once. And we'll talk a little bit about that, the constraints when I'm demoing. So now let's start with the first demonstration. Label printing using the default formats that come with Symbiota. So I will be using SciNet because I believe most people are familiar with the SciNet interface. If not, please let me know and I'll try to explain in more detail. But most Symbiota portals have the same look and feel and the same structure, so you can find the tools anywhere you need. What I normally do is I go to the site. Once you're logged in, because you have to be logged in and have collection permissions, I go to the sitemap and I find the collection for which I want to print labels. So in my example, I'm scrolling down in the sitemap here until I find the collections list. Please let me know if the letters are too small on the screen, or if you're having a hard time following me, I can slow down. But anyway, I'm in the sitemap in the collections, and I'm gonna go to the collection I'm choosing, which is the ASU Vascular Plant Herbarium. And in the data editor control panel, and this is why you need collection permissions or editor permissions, is where you can find the label tools. So you have the two options here. One is print specimens, specimen labels, and the second one is print annotation labels. So we're gonna try the specimen labels first. So I'm just gonna click this. And you are presented with a form to filter specimens. I decided that I want to print labels for a cactus, I think it's a cactus, Echinoceros, and I'm going to filter by the genus. And you're going to be presented with a long, depends on your database, of course, but you're going to be presented with all the matching records, which is a long list in my case, for the filters you added here in this little form. I'm going to pick just the first four or whatever labels just for demonstration. So I'm just clicking the check boxes here, and you can select all or unselect all here as well. So I'm just picking the first four. And I'm gonna scroll all the way down to the bottom of that list. And I am presented with the label printing section. This section, there's a form here where you can select a label format. So we're using the only format available currently for SciNet, which is generic SciNet herbarium label. And you'll see once you select that format, things are going to be automatically populated here in this form. So in this case, there's a heading that's automatically added, which says flora of, and then the state of the specimen. And it's also printing the species authors for infra-specific taxa. There are other options that you can check or uncheck. And we're printing here on this format, we're printing 2 columns per page. Anything you want to change here, if you just want to change for printing that session, this won't change the format itself, so you can feel free to experiment here. And you won't mess with the format that's already stored in the database. So let's say, first let's print this. I'm gonna print in browser. And this will open another tab with the preview of the labels that you have selected, the specimens, the 4 specimens I have selected. So here I can see if the labels look good. The sizing will be determined because I chose 2 columns per page. The sizing, the height of the label is determined by the amount of content you have in your label. So you can see that they're not the same size. This one is a little bit longer just because it has more information. So you can play around with the amount of content you add to your labels, and we'll be showing you how to do that. But once you get to this page, you can either print or save the PDF. So if I do that, it pops up in my Chrome browser, a preview of the labels, and then I can save it as a PDF or print by selecting a printer. And you can also change margins, printer scaling, all the printer options should be available here for you as well. What I normally recommend, if you're printing big number of labels at once and you're doing it in an expensive paper, just save as a PDF first so you can check all labels before wasting a bunch of paper. So in my case, I'm going to cancel because I want to show you another feature that we have, which is this little button called Edit Labels Content. So let's say I think this is too much information in this label. I don't need it right now. So I can click Edit Labels Content, and I can just delete this observation here. Okay, so I'm just going to select and press delete, and boom, my information is gone. And I have not altered the specimen itself. I'm just editing this particular label that I'm printing. And you can do that. It's mostly for content, so you can't do any formatting. But for here, for example, here I want to add a space, and I want to add like parentheses in a date, because this just puts the data here as it came from the database. So I think that looks good. So I want to save. So you click save, and you can now print or save your PDF. Okay. So let's say this is the basic generic SciNet herbarium label. It's the only format we have available currently for SciNet. But I'm going to show you now how we can customize labels. And there's a few options that you can choose. I'm going to this site that we have called sample.symbiota.org, which is a up-to-date version of Symbiota that is very generic, and we're using it just to showcase features, and anyone is welcome to play around with the data here. And you can request to be made an editor, but for collections if you'd like. But anyway, just because it's a neutral Symbiota interface and I am not scared of making changes permanently here. So I'm gonna go the same path I did before, sitemap. I'm gonna scroll to find a collection. I'm gonna go to the herpetology collection just because that's something I looked for. And then I'm gonna print specimen labels. Here I'm gonna choose another genus and I'm going to filter. Just as a side note, there is something called label projects that you can create in the occurrence editor. So we have here a label project that I created called Label Demo SSH Group. To create this, you have to go to a occurrence. So I'm going to this first occurrence. I'm going to click in the pencil icon to open the occurrence editor. And I am going to scroll until I can find the label project, which should be right here. So in the curation section of the occurrence editor, there's a label project field, and that field is just custom text. So you can write any text you'd like. And if you want everything to be in the same label project, you have to write the same exact text for that field. So let's say I want to add this one to the label demo SSH group as well, and I'm going to save it. So now I can close this. And if I'm going to remove the filter for the genus, and I'm just going to filter by the label. I can see there are 2 records in this label project. So I'm going to select both labels. And here you can see that there are way more label formats because I created a few. And besides the ones that are shipped with Symbiota. But I'm going to use the generic vertebrate label, which is here in my profile, it says it's compatible with the visual editor. Once I click that, it's not populating many things because I don't have the options for those. Those options are not selected by default. So the only thing that you can see here is that it will print 3 columns per page. So once I click print in browser, I have only 2 because of the third, I only selected 2 labels, so it won't fill the third option here. But the size is equivalent to 1/3 of a page. And I can do the same thing. I can edit stuff and save and print, or let's say I'm not happy with this format. I want to edit that. Well, you can edit the format, the profile, by going to clicking that pencil. And if you hover over it, it will say Open Label Profile Manager right after the Label Profiles heading. If I click that, that's where we go to the Specimen Label Profiles option or editor. And here you can see the full list of profiles that I have available for my profile. The first group of, the groups are defined by these borders. The first one is for portal profiles. So you can create profiles that are available to anyone in that portal. So if I went to Signet and created one generic label for, I don't know, for like a generic packet label, and I made it available to a portal, to the global portal profiles, everyone in any collection in Signet would be able to use that label. You can also create a collection for a label format just for a particular collection or for your user. So you can, if you're a little worried about experimenting with this, you can just feel free to use your profile to play around, because that won't affect anyone else's label formats. So what I did here is, how do I edit the format? So let's check again what my format looks like. Let's say I want to add a header here and a footer. And I used the generic vertebrate label compatible with visual editor format. So remember what format you picked, click the edit button, and this will open the form. And here you can see all the options you have available. You can change the name of the format here. And this first section is for the header, then the footer, and then you can add a bunch of other more advanced options, including the JSON format if you are courageous enough to look on that. But here, like I said, I just wanted to add a header. So I'm gonna say ASU Herbs Collection, because that's what I want, okay? And now I'm gonna save this. So I just added the text for my header. I'm not changing anything else, and I'm just gonna click the Save Label Profile. Once that was saved, you're back to your editor page, and I'm gonna click this shortcut here in the breadcrumb area that we call. Click on Label Manager to go back to that collection label printing. And here I'm gonna just filter by project again, select my labels, and use that same format to see what has changed. Selected the format, printed in browser. So now you know how to add a header to a label. Okay, this showed up. It wasn't here before, and now it showed up. Great. So these are basic options you can change. Now, let's say I want to add more information to this label, or I want to change the way this looks. So I want to change a font or anything, spacing. You can use the JSON. So let's go back to editing. Let's go to my profile again. And you can either use the JSON format to make your changes, or you can use the visual interface link. Click on that, and you'll be brought to this page where you can drag and drop fields and click on them and format things. So let me show you an example. In this label preview area, you can see more or less how your label is going to look like. And once you're in this form, you're editing the content of the label itself. So you're not editing the header or the footer. You're just editing everything that goes in between the header and the footer of the label. So if I click on, you can see in the first line, we have the family. In the second line, we have the scientific name. And if I click on the scientific name, you can see that it's bolded and italicized. The font size is large. And I think those are the only options. Let's say I wanna make this scientific name. I want to add a spacing between the scientific name and the determination field. So I'm going to click the line here where it's a scientific name, and in the line options, I can add a spacing to the bottom. So I'm just going to click here and add like 1 to the bottom, and you can see that automatically the preview has updated the label preview. What else would I like to do? I want to add occurrence remarks to this label. So I can come to the left panel here and filter all the fields available. So let's go to the specimen. And let's find occurrence remarks. So I just click here, drag it to this new line, and it's showing up in the bottom. And because this label is kind of small, I'm going to click the field, make the font size extra small. And I want to also add some spacing in the top here. So I'm going to come to spacing top, and I'm going to do 2. And there you go. Another thing we can change is let's make the scientific name have a different font family. So this is currently using the default font family for your browser. Now I want to do it, I want to be fancy. So I'm going to use a very non-legible font. And I'm going to save this format. So once you click save, the window closes and you're brought back to this form, and you have to remember to click the save again here in the label profile. Once I hit that, I can go back again to my label manager, click my label project, select my labels, my specimens, select my format, and see what happens. And there you go. I changed, there's a little bit space added here. There's the occurrence remarks, and the scientific name has been changed to that hideous font. So this is the basics of how you edit label formats. Am I going too fast? Is anyone? Should I slow down? How am I going? Good?
Keep going.
Okay, so just a few things about advanced customizations. So the things, let me open again the label format visual editor to show you what kinds of things you can edit. You can edit for each field, you can pick the prefix. So for instance, the identified by has a det by prefix. You can add that here. You can also add a suffix. So let's say I want to do the date identified between parentheses. You can add that here. You select a field and then you add parentheses, opening and closing. So now you can see it's inside parentheses. And you can change the size of the font. These are the options, the position in the line, left or right, and the font family. For the lines, which are, selected here, you have to click the line themselves to select. You can click here to reorder them or to remove them. You can select a line and change the delimiter of the fields. So here I want to add a comma. Let's say I want to add a comma between fields. You can add a comma here. And you're always going to see the preview changing. And you can also change text align and the spacing between lines. Those are the options for now. If you want to do more advanced customization, like a specific label size. So let's say the number of columns is not enough for you. You have to have a specific fixed label size. You have to do advanced customizations. If you want to change colors or fonts that are not available in our basic editor, you also have to custom code. If you want to change the way the barcode is previewed in a label, you also have to change to customize it. If you want to add fields that are very particular for your Symbiota installation, that as well, for now, you have to custom edit. And also the same goes for the position of items. So let's say you want to rotate a label barcode. Instead of having it horizontally placed, you want to rotate it to become like perpendicular to the axis of the label. You have to customize it. And how do you do that? It's obviously a lot of details to get into right now, but it's all possible. And you can we can think about giving like an advanced label formatting workshop in the future, or you can request our help to do so. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about determination label printing. Before I move on, I would suggest if you're creating new label formats, I would suggest always using the generic profiles and cloning them. So here in my sample website, you can clone any profiles desired to anywhere. So let's say I want to play around with the generic, like the label I was already doing, the generic vertebrate label. You can just scroll down to the clone profile option and select where you want it to go. So if I click user profile and I clone it, if I scroll to my user profile, I'm going to see a label with the clone added to the title. And then I can just go here and edit things to my liking. Please note that we still have a few bugs going on in this feature because things keep changing very fast. but I will be pushing the compatible with visual editor generic formats today to Symbiota so that they will be available to anyone. And you can start playing around with that if you're more comfortable with the visual editor interface. And I'm saying that because if you try to edit the current generic formats that might be available in your portal, they have advanced customizations that are not available yet in the visual editor. So you might see some errors happening, like some fields not showing up. And that is just because they're too advanced. So I will be making these other compatible ones available to everyone shortly. So about annotations, going back to my sample database, an annotation is basically a determination label. It's the same thing. To do that, you have to have occurrence editing permissions. And if you go to your profile, like I did, and occurrence management, and I'm going to the collection where I've added determinations. If you go to the print annotation labels, you will be presented with the labels you have annotated. How have I annotated these labels? Well, I went to the occurrence editor and I created a determination in the determination history. So if you know how to do that, if you edit this, there's this checkbox that shows up, add to print queue. So you have to make sure the checkbox is checked because that's when the label will show up here in your profile for you to print them. So once I do that, I just select my determination labels and I can change only a few things as far as formatting of the label, which are these things available here. So header, footer, catalog numbers, and the number of rows and borders. So if I click print, you will be presented with just the scientific determination, a scientific name with the determiner name. And in this case, there's a footer that's printed with it as well, and the date. So this is how you go to determination, annotation label printing. And just here a recap of the differences between those labels. Specimen labels contain the full specimen information, while the annotation labels are only the determination information. And in the specimen labels, you can fully customize the visuals of how the labels are going to be printed. For the annotation labels, you can only customize whatever you see available in that little form. And for the specimen labels, you can click the edit content to change the actual text of the label, not the specimen, just the label. And you can't do that for annotations yet. So we have a few resources in the Symbiota docs where you can read more about how to customize and print labels, including the specimen packet printing. And we will be adding more to those documents soon, hopefully. Does anyone have questions or problems? That covers everything that I had. So.
Laura, Bonnie has a question.
Okay.
Bonnie asks, can you print the month spelled out so the date is not ambiguous?
Yes. Let me share again. Why did I stop sharing? Yes, so if I go to the, in my opinion, the best way to see the fields available for printing is just going to the visual editor, just because collection management panel, just because it's where you can list all the fields available. So if I go to print annotation, print specimen labels, sorry. And then let's try those two again. And I'm just going to go to the label profile and edit and visual interface. So this list here is where you can find all fields available for printing. For the month, if I go to event and filter by event, we are using date identified, for instance, but let's say you want to add the collection date, event date. Event date will be formatted in the year slash month slash date, I think, or whatever format you have in your portal. But if you do verbatim event date, that's going to put the verbatim, like whatever has been typed in the specimen occurrence. But you can also do month name. So you can stitch your date together by doing in whatever order you want. So you can say year, month name, and date, right? And you can add a separator. The standard separator is just a space, as you can see here. But let's say you want to make them separated by a hyphen or something, you're going to have the hyphenized option here. So that's how you do it. Does that answer the question? I hope so.
I think that's good. Thanks, Laura. Bonnie, let us know in the chat.
That does answer my question, but that seems really rather clunky, especially on the annotations too. You know, if you have 6/3, is that March or June? You know.
Yeah. For the annotations, fortunately, you can't change the standard format. Not that I know of, just for the specimen label. And it's the only way we have to customize it, just because there are so many possible formats that people request that we can't really predict, you know. But yeah, that's the only option. I'm sorry. Any more questions or comments?
Feel free to unmute yourself or put a question in the chat. Either works. Oh, I see. Yep. Go ahead, Joni.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when I go through the process of getting to annotation label printing, there's not a way to select. There's just a big long list on my what I have reference to, and none of them have my name on it, actually. So I don't know if my permissions are messed up or something. I'll have to.
So when you go to print annotation label printing, you don't see something like what I'm showing in my screen.
Yes, but none of them are mine. They're all Wendy's or whoever, all these other people.
Oh, so your annotations are not being saved, probably.
Huh.
Huh. Yeah, that is weird. If you could.
I'll have to go back and find a specific example and track it down and then get back to you guys. So.
Yeah, if you could, feel free to shoot us an email at help Symbiota. What is the email? Sorry, Lindsay.
It's help@symbiota.org. I just stuck it in the chat. And we also have a web form where you can submit your questions. So you can do it either way. And if you go to the web form, you can also review questions that you've submitted in the past, which is kind of a nice feature. So you can go back and look at old questions too.
Thank you.
Okay, and we can solve like these issues that might be very specific. So we can help with that for sure. We have a question, I guess. If anyone would like, we were considering the option of giving, making an event called like Label Clinic to help people with their label formats if they're having issues, or if they want to do something customized and they don't know how to do it, or anything label related. So if you're interested in something like that, please let us know so we can organize something like that, because we're going to do it depending on the demand that we have.
Add a little +1 in the chat if a special label, like a more in-depth label session, would be of interest to you.
I'm going to +1 for Wendy because she's always asking me, how do I fix my labels? So I have no idea. So I'm gonna +1 for her.
Something I want to say that I haven't really showed was both specimen and annotation labels. You can export them to a document, a Word document, but it's not very customizable in my experience. But at least you can do whatever you want with the docx format. And yeah, it just would have to do that every time you print labels. So that's why I only showed the easiest option, which is to print in the browser. So you don't have to be making adjustments every time you print labels.
I'll just say that I use that all the time because I print out labels in 1 to 2 pages at a time because my labels are like humongous.
Mhm.
And because of the project I work on right now, but when I get ready to do my own flora projects, I would be interested in learning more about the customizing and being able to print more labels at once. So that works well for me and for our little project at the botanical gardens.
No, that's good to hear. We also have had requests to add the ability to customize the annotation label format, but that is currently, we don't know what's the demand for that, so we are not prioritizing that. So if anyone has wants to prioritize that, please just let us know and we will try to work something out, see about funding and all of that.
Karen says in the chat, I haven't tried making labels in Symbiota yet, but I would be interested. And I'll just add to that, if you haven't tried making labels in your Symbiota portal, once you get used to it, it's really not too bad. I highly encourage everybody to kind of just go and play around with it. Once you get going, like at least the basic editing's not too complicated, I think. The customizations, like Laura was saying, might be a little trickier, but it's kind of fun once you get started.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, I think a good starting point would be to just clone one of the existing label formats and just go about figuring out how they work and just play with the formats and everything. So, oh, I see a question here. Is there a way to set a backup field? So like for geocoordinate, if verbatim coordinates are null, then use the decimal, lat, and long. Yes, those fields are separate. So in your format, if you just drag both fields to the place where you would like them to be, each of them, if they're null or if they're empty, they won't show up in the label, and the value that is not empty will show up. But there's a caveat, which is if both are filled out, both will show up. So you just have to pay attention to that and make sure your database has a standard way of treating those dates. That makes sense. All depends on what is in your database.
It looks like we have a hand raised. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, this is Cindy Schema from the Mid-Atlantic group. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the upstream process. If you're a collector and you have records that are general research observations, how do they get moved into a particular collection? And can you move the same records into 2 collections? Like say if you have duplicates and you're sending them to do 2 different herbaria in your area, how do you do that?
So if you're a collector and you're normally, Lindsay, Samantha, Nico, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but normally the people responsible for entering the data in the different herbaria or collections are the collection managers themselves. So if, let's say you collected and you're donating duplicates to a different collection, then I think they would be responsible for entering that data. But if you're entering the data in all collections, you just have to go to each collection and transfer the data yourself.
So I thought there was some way to have a general research observation moved into the collections.
Cindy, I can jump in on that one a little bit.
Okay.
If that general research observation is within the portal, so in your case, within the SciNet network, then you can easily pull it up when you do duplicate searching. And then any collection can look for that collector and collector number and then pull it into their own collection. So, but that is doing it one by one. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I was under the impression that you could have, because like we're trying to get a couple of regular collectors entering their own data rather than just sending us spreadsheets. So it would be useful from the collection side to just be able to sort of pull from their observation records into the collection when we get them mounted. And then we can print labels, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, I tend to, if I know that a collector is sending me all their stuff, I tend to have them just enter it directly into my, as an occurrence in my collection, or they enter it as an observation and then I pull whichever ones I see come through the chute.
But you're doing them one by one.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying. If you wanted to be able to search, I think you might, people can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the other way to do it might be to search for all of their observations and then do a download and then import them. That would be a way you could do it in bulk.
Right. Okay.
Yes, and there's a relatively new tool that Ed has been developing where you can import from one Symbiota collection to the other. If they're not like in SciNet where they're sharing the same portal, but let's say you're in a different portal, you can import the samples just by adding a few import profile configurations. So you could be able to do that in the future maybe. So I would suggest, could you please shoot us an email and we can figure out maybe if we have like a custom strategy that we can implement, because that might be helpful to other people as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
This is an issue for a couple of collectors that do here at DBG that do general observations and then expect us to move them into the collection. So this is good information. Thanks.
One way that I use this that I'm really excited about is that I have collectors who like their own special label format. And so I can just make them a template that matches the headers and footers that they always want because they're collecting for a certain flora project or something like that. And that allows me to not have to do it every time, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, Jen, thanks that's a very good observation. And it reminds me of for the mollusk collection here at ASU, we have done that where there are two major collectors for most of the records. So we created two label profiles, one for each collector, and then it's much easier for the curator to just print on demand the labels referring to a particular collector with their specific label format. So it makes her life much easier, in my opinion.
I have a question for you, Lara. So in the labels, are the fields that you can choose from only what's in the occurrence editor and what's in the determinations right now? And would more fields maybe be added in the future?
The fields are all the fields available for an occurrence. So we are working, currently it's not everything because there have been a few additions. So there are some fields that we're going to be adding soon, but it's normally everything available for a particular occurrence. So anything you see in the occurrence form should be available for printing.
Anybody else? Well, we can wrap up a little bit early and give you all back an extra 9 minutes. Oh, somebody's coming on. Jen.
It's me. I just wanted to say, Laura, thank you so much for your development on this, because the ability to edit those labels and save them is a real time saver. It's awesome work. So thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing it evolve.
Yeah, my pleasure. And if anyone comes through any quirks or bugs or anything that's not working, please feel free to report all those things. It's really helpful to us to figure out things that we have to fix. So yes, I would really appreciate if anyone comes through issues and report them to us.
All right. Thanks, Laura. This was great. And thanks everybody for attending. We will see you again, not in July, but in August. So there will be no meeting next month, but we'll see you in a couple months.
Thank you, everyone.